What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm going to talk through the free hit for Game Week 29, the players that I think should pretty much be locked in, and then the other options you could look at as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. So let's start with the goalkeepers and defenders. And just quickly before I run through the players themselves, a lot of people are going to ask me, am I free hitting in Game Week 29? And the answer is I'm 99.99% sure that I will. So basically a yes. I just haven't activated the chip yet. For anyone that's looked at a free hit 29 draft, even if you've got terrible team value, there's a lot of money left over. So chasing price rises is just not really needed. And on the very tiny off chance that games get called off because of some freak event, I want to make sure that I haven't activated the chip too early. It sounds stupid when you say it out loud, but that's the reason. But basically, I am free hitting in 29. On the bench, I've got Leno, Gibbs White, Luca Dean, and Nico Williams. I wouldn't pay a huge amount of attention to that yet, because who makes the first 11 by the time we get to Saturday's deadline will play a part in who is then on the bench. But I think for the most part, those players are fine. And hopefully I'll pick 11 players that are going to start, right? So I shouldn't even need the bench anyway. In goal, I've gone for Flecken. I think over the course of a season, there's always going to be game weeks where your attackers play your defenders. For my team in game week 30, I'll probably have Haaland up against Gabriel, for example. But on a free hit, you can try and avoid that, right? It's a little bit easier to do that. You've got that luxury. And I just don't see myself buying a Burnley attacker. And when I look at the triple ups I've got elsewhere, like on Spurs, for example, like Flecken is just the next best goalkeeper. So I think I'd say he's a certainty in this team. I just don't really see me going elsewhere. In defence, I've got Porro, Fulham away, Reguilon, Burnley away, who is currently flagged. I'll come back onto that in a minute. And then Doughty, Forest at home. If all three of those players were fit, I think they'd pretty much be nailed in this draft as well. Because although the Luton defence is not great, and I don't see them keeping a clean sheet against Nottingham Forest, even at home, he is one of the more attacking defenders available this week. Like, you look at the fixtures, like, which teams there do we think, from those 4 matches, do we think are going to get a clean sheet? I think Brentford have probably got one of the better chances against Burnley, but it is an away game. You know, Luton and Forest, I'd expect them both to concede. Probably the same for Fulham and Spurs. But obviously, I've got Porro anyway, so even if Spurs keep a clean sheet, I've got that covered. And I think West Ham and Villa will both score as well. So I think if we're looking at those 4 games expecting a lack of clean sheets, then you've probably got to go for nailed-on attacking defenders instead. So I think in that case, Doughty probably makes the cut. Same with Pedro Porro. I think from a non-free hit perspective, if I was buying a Spurs defender this week, I'd probably go through Doggy because of the price difference now. And I think that money will come in handy later on when you're trying to get through all the double game weeks. But for a free hit, I still think Porro is the more attacking defender in that Spurs side. So that's who I've gone for. The only case I could make for Udogie on a free hit is his ownership is lower. And I think even with people buying him this week, it will still be lower than Pedro Porro. So maybe that's a reason to go for him. But I'm just going to go for the more attacking defender. I think in general on free hit, it's already a differential in itself that you're playing it. You've probably reduced the amount of hits you need over the last few weeks. You're going to have 11 players versus other people that are going to have like 8, 9, 10. Using the chip is already a differential. You don't need to go and seek out another 5 to 6 differential players on top. So I'm pretty happy with Porro. Reguilon, I am not sure he will make the final cut because I don't know if I will trust his minutes, even if Thomas Frank says he's available. I do think if he was fully fit, that would be a lock, right? Burnley away is not a bad fixture. I don't mind the double up in a free hit week like this. We've seen how attacking he can be, but even a minor hamstring strain could be a problem. And it might be that they think he's fit enough to start. And I'm sure they wouldn't take a risk, right? But even if he starts, what if he then comes off early? So I think that is the one place in my defence that is potentially up for grabs. I just think the options of who you could go for instead are not terrible, but they're not great either. Like, if we're thinking there's a lack of clean sheets and we need to go for attacking defenders, I'd probably look towards Aston Villa. Luca Dean, interestingly, has started against Spurs in game week 28, and he started midweek in Europe as well, but he only made 57 minutes. And my worry is, if Moreno starts for the midweek European game for Villa, and then Luca Dean starts at the weekend against West Ham, what if he comes off before the 60th minute? And there is a bit of rotation worry there as well. Matty Cash is an option, But Diego Carlos, Konza, Pau Torres are all fit now. So Matty Cash is not nailed either. So I think once you go outside of Reguilon, it gets quite tricky. So I'd maybe punt on Luca Dean if Moreno plays midweek and hope that Luca Dean makes it past 60 minutes. I mean, the ideal situation there would be that Villa have a clean sheet before he goes off and then they concede afterwards. But Luca Dean's an option. Nico Williams is a name that I've seen touted quite a lot recently, like very recently, because of the fixtures Forest have got and the free hit in 29. He's played 90 minutes played 90 minutes for 5 games in a row. And I mean, Luton away is not a bad fixture and he can be fairly attacking, although the numbers don't really suggest that recently. I'm not that inspired by picking a Nottingham Forest defender, it has to be said. The other option is probably, like, I wouldn't want to double up on Luton. I can't go for another Spurs defender. The other option would be to pick a different Brentford defender, possibly. Roslev, I think that's how you pronounce it, or close-ish, I think, has played 90 minutes last 2 games, scored a goal against Chelsea, basically playing right wing-back. Presumably that will continue. So he could go in instead. If I think there's a chance that Brentford are going to get a clean sheet, I've got no Burnley attackers, maybe I take that right wing-back. Maybe I take that wing-back instead of Reguilon, because on the left side, it was Lewis Potter that played instead of Reguilon, and he's listed as a midfielder, so he wouldn't really be an option for free hit. So there's a chance that I stick to Burnley and I just go for Roslev instead. But I kind of, do you know what, right? For anyone that's played FPL for a while, Luca Dean has been an absolute, it's just pain and misery. I'm not sure if anyone's ever got points from Luca Dean, but imagine how good it would feel if you finally get it right on a free hit. So he's the one I kind of want to go for if Reguilon's out, but I might just stick to a different Brentford defender, even though that's not that exciting. And then in midfield, I've got Son, Maddison and Bowen, and then basically a spot that's up for grabs. Now, on the deadline stream, I probably will end up hiding a few players just to make it a little bit more interesting. But for this video, the reason I've done that is to show who is pretty much locked in already, barring injuries and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm free to change my mind about any player, but I'd be very surprised if Son, Maddison and Bowen don't make the cut. That 4th or 5th midfielder, I'm a little bit less sure on. So I'm going to talk about those players at the end. I think with Son, I mean, you just need to look at what he did to Aston Villa, right? I don't really need to give you too many arguments to why he's in this team. Obviously, Villa were down to 10 men for some of that game as well, but Fulham away is not a bad fixture. He's a guarantee for minutes, starts. He's on penalties as well. He's their main goal scorer. We know how good of a finisher he is, right? Son is definitely in, and he will probably be my captain this week as well. I think Maddison is easily the second best Spurs attacker, and with that fixture, there has to be a triple up on Spurs. If there was a lot of other attackers I really like this week, then maybe I would go for the Porro and Udogie double up in defence, but I'm just not that convinced of the Spurs defence in general, and there isn't a massive amount of other attackers I like, so Maddison just makes it really easy to pick him this week. And then Bowen, again, like Son, you've not got the penalties, but he's West Ham's main goal threat. He's guaranteed to start, almost always plays 90 minutes as well. And as much as Villa is not an easy fixture, West Ham are the home team, so he will get chances in that game. So for me, he's pretty much a no-brainer, right? So those 3 midfield picks are quite easy for me. It's just that 4th or maybe 5th spot if I go for a 3-5-2 that I'm unsure of. So let's look at the other forwards that are locked in, and then we'll talk about the other attackers. So you've probably already guessed at this point, but the 2 forwards that are very unlikely to leave this draft are Ivan Toney and Ollie Watkins. Obviously, Watkins just blanked against Spurs, but not worried about that whatsoever. The West Ham defence is not exactly watertight. Watkins is Aston Villa's main goal threat, and there really is a lack of other forwards to even look at, which I'll discuss in a minute. And then with Toney, some people have started to put a bit of a question mark on him as a pick. Obviously, Visser has done very well the last couple of games. I think he's scored in both of them. Yeah, goal against Arsenal and a goal against Chelsea, and even one against West Ham as well, actually. So it's 3 games in a row that he has scored. But I just think if we're trying to build a draft full of near certain starters, that has to be Toney, right? He's going to play the full 90 minutes. He's on penalties as well. I mean, Visser's played great, right? And I'm sure he'll keep his place. But is that a guarantee? Could Morpay start instead? It's possible, right? So I don't mind Visser as an option alongside Toney. You'd have to drop one of your Brentford defender or goalkeeper spots. Like, I don't mind that, but I definitely would not have Visser instead of Toney. So those 2 pretty much locked in. And at that point, I would say, what is that? Flecken, Porro, Doughty, Son, Maddison, Bowen, Toney and Watkins. 8 of my 11 are pretty much already decided. And if Reguilon is fit, then that's 9. All right, if I go for a different Brentford defender, like I said, that's already 9 players locked in. It really is just those final 2 spots. And that's where maybe things get a little bit more interesting. Maybe you do go for that lower owned player that other people don't have. But I'm pretty happy with that. I know it's boring. I know you're going to see this draft all over Twitter, all over YouTube, all over Instagram, etc. But that's what happens when you free hit in a game. Sorry, in a game week where there's only 4 matches, right? Your options are already narrowed down. You've only got 8 teams to choose from. And obviously some of those teams aren't even worth looking at. And I don't really care if it's boring, right? The free hit advantage is not just in the week you use it. It's also outside of that, right? And I'm not saying everyone should have bought Bruno Fernandes. I know I got extremely lucky. But by having him, instead of most of the attackers that play in game week 29, outside of like Maddison, of course, who did well too, I've already gained points. And now I get to have a full play in 11. So that's the core of the draft. Let's just quickly discuss the other attackers. So for the rest of the attacking options that are going to fill those last 2 spots in my first 11, I've split them into penalty takers and then everyone else. And I'm going to give you a quick overview of my thoughts on all of them. So Gibbs White is definitely up there as an option, mostly because he gets to play against Luton. Now, I know I've got Doughty in my defence, and where possible, I'm trying to avoid attackers playing against defenders. But there's not a huge amount of clean sheets on offer this week. I think Doughty is mostly in there for the attacking potential. So I don't mind having a Nottingham Forest attacker. From what I could see, they've only had 1 penalty so far this season, and Gibbs White took it. So I think he is first choice. But if Chris Wood is on the pitch, and he started at the weekend, he may take one instead. So I don't think it's an absolute guarantee Gibbs White would take the next penalty. But I think it is the most likely outcome based on what we've seen so far. And out of all the Forest attackers, Gibbs White is pretty much nailed, right? I think since game week 16, he's played 80 to 90 minutes, pretty much 90 minutes every game, apart from game week 21 against Brentford away. So he's nailed, likely to be on penalties, decent-ish attacking stats, and a really good fixture. So he's definitely up there. I think with Chris Wood, I'd just be a bit too worried about his minutes. But if Awani is ruled out or something like that, then maybe I could look at him. Paquetá is a similar situation to Gibbs White in that I think he's first choice penalty taker, but the fixture's not quite so good, right? West Ham are the home team, and I'm happy with Bowen because he's guaranteed to start and his attacking threat from open play is decent. But Aston Villa's not an easy fixture. I think if Paquetá doesn't get the penalty, I'm just not massively convinced about attacking returns elsewhere. I guess on free hit, right, I'm happy to have 8 or 9 players that are just locked in and boring that everyone else has. But for the final 2 spots, maybe there should be something there which, like a gut feeling or something about them. And I just feel with Paquetá or even Ward-Prowse, who's taken a couple of penalties as well, I just don't have that feeling with them. I'm just not sure I want double West Ham attack. When I say that out loud, it doesn't sound that inspiring. And don't get me wrong, Gibbs White is not a player I really want to see in my team that much for the rest of this season, but at least he gets to play against Luton. So Paquetá probably on penalties. Ward-Prowse has taken a couple as well. Don't particularly like either. With Fulham, Willian, we think is first choice, but he's not starting at the moment. So Andreas could be on them. Again, not very inspired by those picks. I don't mind Douglas Luiz at all. Absolutely guaranteed to start. But again, that attacking threat from open play, for me, is just not there. I know he's had a lot of returns. I'm not saying he's a bad pick. Anyone that's got him who isn't free hitting, happy days, right? If he gets a penalty, you're laughing. I'm just not sure about it. And then you got Morris, right? I've said about Gibbs White getting to play against Luton. I don't think Morris at home to Forest is a bad pick either. And obviously with Adebayo out, his minutes have been pretty secure. And his returns recently have been great as well. Obviously the first game of the double against Palace, nothing so far. We'll see what happens against Bournemouth. But I think that's 7 returns in 8 now. Even if he blanks against Bournemouth, it's still 7 in 9. And he is going to be their main goal threat. So I think on that list of penalty takers, Gibbs White and Morris are probably the 2 that I'm looking at right now. In terms of the rest of the players you could look at, Leon Bailey, definitely, when I say his name out loud, that does kind of excite me as a pick, right? He's got the minutes as well. If he gets rested midweek for Villa's European game, that means he's almost certainly going to start at the weekend. I think he will be one of those other 2 attackers, in which case I've then only got 1 spot to fill. So I really like Leon Bailey. His underlying numbers are great. Much more likely to get you an attack and return than someone like Luiz. And I think for 1 week only, I'd be willing to take that punt. If I was having to pick a Villa midfielder for the next 10 weeks, I'd probably take Luiz for the guaranteed minutes, less injury prone, I would say. penalties as well. But for 1 week only, I really like Bailey. So I think he's high up on my list. I don't mind Kudus. I'd much rather pick him than Paquetá or Ward-Prowse, even without the penalties. But I'm not as convinced as other people about him as an FPL pick. I know he got a bunch of returns early on, but I think Bowen is clear of him. And as a double up, I'm not quite sure. Elanga, I was very interested in until he got benched this week. And obviously, Awani's had fitness concerns as well. And look, Elanga might start the next game. His underlying numbers without penalties are better than Gibbs-White. Right? So I could be tempted by him. Like Bailey and Elanga as the final 2 spots when the rest of my team is like solid. I'm kind of up for that. But getting benched last week has kind of really put me off. There's just no guarantee he starts. And I'm willing to go for a differential or something a bit, bit different. I want them to play, right? Elanga being on the bench is not great because he will come on. So that benching at the weekend's really put me off. It's not like he's a massive rotation threat, but that probably is. I don't know. He's even got more points than Gibbs-White. Like, the annoying thing is he's played 90 minutes the previous 4 games. I don't know if there was a reason that he was benched for this match. Maybe Forest fans can leave a comment and let me know. But 29 minutes against Brighton. There's just the odd game throughout the season where he's missed. He's played a lot of 80 to 90 minutes matches. Just you don't want this week to be the one where he's benched again. So I am very tempted by Elanga, but I don't know. The minutes worry me a little bit. With Spurs, Werner, Johnson, Kulusevski, Richarlison, I just don't think I can go there. I think you could, even if Richarlison was out, it could be Werner on the left, Johnson on the right, Werner on the left, Kulusevski on the right. It's just a combination of those players. I just don't think that's worth it. And Richarlison wasn't even in the squad, so I'm not going to take that risk. So I'm counting out pretty much all other Spurs attackers unless one of them picks up a knock, and then I might be tempted to take the punt. The problem with that is you then have a knock-on effect where I've got to get rid of Maddison or Son, not happening, or I've got to get rid of Porro and go to a different team's defender, and it probably just doesn't work. And sometimes the free hit is like a domino effect. You just work backwards. And so if I want a third attacker like Richarlison, I've got to drop Porro or Werner, whoever it is. I'm just not so sure about that. Muniz, in general, I like as a pick. Do I think he's better than Watkins or Tony or Morris as a forward? Not convinced for 29, so probably won't go there. In Burmo, I would love, even without penalties, but there is no way I'm going to trust the fitness, right? He's more likely to be back after the international break. Visser is definitely an option, but again, the minutes concern is there. He seems to be ahead of Morpay again, which I think most people would have expected, but Morpay might start. Chong and Barkley from Luton just don't inspire me. I think if you picked Barkley last week to have him also over 29 because you're not free hitting, absolutely fair enough. I probably would have done the same thing. But on a free hit, I just don't see myself putting Ross Barkley in. And then you got Fofana at Burnley, who I don't mind, but I think the fact that I might go into this week with double Brentford defence means I'll probably just take the chance on the clean sheet and not go for someone like Fofana. But he has played, I think I wouldn't say gone under the radar, right? I think that's the wrong thing to say, but he has played a lot recently, and he got his goal at the weekend. Where is he here? He's played 90 minutes every single match since game week 24, so the minutes are there, and he's finally got a goal, but Burnley attacker, again, you say it out loud, it's just not there. So there's lots of other options, lots of differentials, lots of flair picks there, but in terms of ones I'd be confident on, I think the final 2 spots will be made up of either Gibbs-White, Morris or Bailey. I think I'm pretty much down to those 3 players, and I really like Bailey. So it's Morris or Gibbs-White. I might end up going for someone else, but at this point, that's kind of where I'm set. So, like I said, if I can just bring this back up here, this is what the team looks like right now with those 2 spots up for grabs. So Flecken, Porro, Reguilon, Doughty, Son, Maddison, Bowen, probably Bailey, then Tony, Watkins plus 1 more, Gibbs-White or Morris. And then I'm pretty much locked in. I said this last week. The free hit 29 almost picks itself. And I don't mind that. It's a stress-free week ahead of an international break. And then from April, the real business end of the season starts. What was I going to say? If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button. If you listen on podcast, rate 5 stars. Let me know what you hate about this team in the comments below. Who you would change. Who have I missed as well? There's probably an attacker or a defender that I should be giving a bit more credit to that I haven't. Leave a comment below. Otherwise, I'll hopefully catch you again tomorrow.